Welcome to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast where seeing things differently inspires limitless possibilities. The Limitless podcast was created in order to inform, educate, entertain, and share stories from within the blind and partially sighted community that show that the opportunities for those who are blind or partially sighted are truly limitless. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to your host, the founder of Blind Beginnings, Shawn Marcellet.
Welcome back to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Marcellet. Thank you for joining us again this week. So today we are talking about doing presentations about our blindness at school, maybe other places as well. We're going to find out as a way to educate people about blindness, about the capabilities of people who are blind, which is a big part of what Blind Beginnings is all about. And with me today are two of our semi-regular co-hosts, Ishita and Jinnie. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hello.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
So presenting to your class at school about blindness or visual impairment is something I have never done. I'm just going to admit that right off the bat. When I was a teenager, I was very uncomfortable talking about my visual impairment. In fact, I worked very hard to hide it at school. And I don't think most of my classmates knew that I had a visual impairment. And so I feel like a bit of a hypocrite because I definitely recommend to kids today that this is an awesome thing to do. I think it's better that you talk about it than somebody talks on your behalf about it, or that it doesn't get talked about at all. Because I think sighted children and youth have a lot of questions, and the best person to answer them is you. So I'd love to hear from both of you. Actually, I guess remind our listeners a little bit about yourselves, but tell us your thoughts on this topic, and have you presented to your classes at school?
So my name is Ishita. I am a fourth year university student right now, and I have a visual condition called cone rod dystrophy, which primarily affects my central field of vision. And I've done a handful of presentations in school and outside of school as well, which we can get into. But I would say I agree with Shawn that I think that taking ownership of your condition and being able to explain it yourself tends to go a lot better than other people. Because even if it's your parent, your best friend, your teacher, someone who knows really well, they can't quite put it in the same way that you can. And they may use words that you're not necessarily comfortable with when describing your vision. So I definitely agree that doing it yourself is the best way to go. But having said that, I have had to give presentations out of necessity because people were very insistent on asking people around me about my equipment. And it was just the easiest way to stop all that from happening. And we can get a bit into those stories as well. But then as I got a bit more comfortable and older in high school with presentation in general, I started just being able to talk to my class and my PE class and my basketball team and about how my vision works, and being more comfortable to step up and say, I actually want to be the one presenting, and letting everyone know before the questions come in, and creating that space for people to ask those questions or voice their concerns myself. So it was a bit of a first out of necessity, but then getting comfortable with it and then doing it myself as I got older.
Awesome. I want to come back to something you said, but first we'll hear from Jinnie. So Jinnie, what about you?
Yeah, that was great. Definitely agree with a lot of what Ishita has already said. So as a reminder to our listeners, I'm Jinnie. I have been fully blind since birth, and I'm currently in post-secondary. I've been there for several years now, and I started presenting to schools in 2015. So pretty soon after I joined our youth leadership program. And when I'm referring to schools, presenting in schools, I'm talking about middle school, elementary school. Those are the schools I typically presented in. And I would do a few a year. I really loved it. I feel like it definitely, I saw like a lot of learning happening, especially at those ages. I never, unfortunately, had a chance to do a high school one. When I was younger, like people would like just kind of talk more so to the teacher just about me, or like sometimes they tried like they'd be like, okay, we're doing a presentation for your class, this is what we're doing and you're going to be involved, but like it was like the forced inclusion sort of aspect. And then I'd be like, no, like this makes me uncomfortable, I don't want them to, like I don't want that. And I don't think that part was either addressed. And I think like the discomfort came from a lot of the fact that, you know, like it was kind of being done in a way where it was like kind of amplifying my blindness a little bit too much. Like I kind of like presentations that are a bit more integrated. And then after kind of doing presentations for a few years, like I got asked like by name a couple times just within the Langley school district, because I was just doing so many. And then I like Langley was doing a TEDx event, so that's how I ended up participating in that. And when I graduated high school and I left university, I still actually did a few, but it's not as many as I used to, just because I'm not really in the district as much anymore. In terms of university, I think it's quite different. Like, I don't think I would do presentations in classes personally, just because like each semester your classes are changing and you have like 3 or 4 classes. And honestly, like you're not with those people for the whole year. Not only that, like it's a little bit more awkward because like university classes specifically have more focus on a subject. Like it would just be out of place and just drawing attention.
Okay. So I just want to clarify, Jinnie, that you did not do presentations to your classes in elementary school or high school. When you're talking about the presentations you've done, they've been to other schools, like not the class you were attending at the time.
Oh, I see. Yes. So in my high school, never did any. In my elementary school, only the ones that were kind of like, you're doing it sort of thing.
Yeah.
It was more so, let's go to other schools, which was quite interesting that like my own schools didn't really utilize that. Okay.
So I want to talk a little bit about, because Ishita, you mentioned people asking lots of questions to people around you, which was what sort of motivated you to do a presentation. And Jinnie, you mentioned kind of people around you deciding there should be a presentation and you should be involved. So yeah, just kind of like, what was it like? Maybe we'll start with you, Ishita, being that kid that people are talking about, and how did you kind of get to a place, and how did you make that happen that you wanted to speak on your own behalf?
Yeah. So it sounds like me and Jinnie had very opposite experiences, but I think it's good because we get both perspectives, where mine were only in my own school and just talking to the kids that I was interacting with. So I think the first time it happened was in grade 5 or 6. And I was very, very shy. I didn't like bringing attention to my blindness if I could help it, because it would just cause a lot of, again, questions. And I didn't have a diagnosis at the time. And I was very bad at describing how I would see, because people would just misinterpret what I was saying a lot of the time. And most of what I had heard about my own condition was said by doctors who also didn't know what I had. So it was just very convoluted, and it just got more confusing when you get a bunch of 13 and 12-year-olds involved and trying to understand everything. So I think the first time it was when I was playing in PE, and a lot of the students were asking the PE teacher why I was kind of not looking straight. And I think it was a softball, and I had someone telling me when to swing to hit the little ball. And that was the way I would still participate in PE. Like I would still participate as best as I can. Softball being, I think, the most one that I had to have the biggest accommodation with. Someone had to stay with me at all times, so I wouldn't, accidentally hit myself in the face with the bat and actually try to hit the ball. And someone had to run with me to the bases because I couldn't see where the ball was at any point. And my teacher herself, she had a disability. She was deaf. So I was able to, and I've known her since I was like 2. So I knew her very well, and she knew my family very well. So I personally didn't have any trouble with her answering the questions on my behalf. Just again, mostly because I was shy at the time. But I think the questions got so much that she just gathered everyone in the class and was like, okay, you have questions, ask her. And it was a bit scary, not gonna lie, because again, I didn't know how to address those questions right off the bat. And I didn't know people were even asking questions about me at the time. It was a very much like, put everything out there, ask her now. And everyone got very quiet. So like, that was my first memory. And what I remember saying was like, very basically describing my condition and just trying to say, I need support. Usually I just need someone to help me run because I can't see very well. And everyone kind of just, dispersed really quickly and no one talked to me after that for a while. So that's what I mean, becoming out of necessity, where people kept asking my teachers questions about me. And I had equipment, like a CCTV, like a big magnifier, in one of my classes, usually my homeroom class, because I would have to pop in and out and use that for worksheets that weren't able to be put onto like a digital copy. So a lot of students that were coming into this teacher's room were seeing this and had no idea what it was. And were asking my teacher, what is that? And I was coming in to her class. I think this is fast forward, I think first year of high school at this point, grade 8, grade 9. And I was walking in to do a science test, and the teacher stopped me and said, a lot of these kids are asking about your CCTV. Do you mind talking to them about it? And I'm like, well, I have a test right now. I don't know if this is the best time, but sure. Okay. So I got in front of the class, and they were, because my school had a mix of elementary and high school in the first couple of years. So they were all in grade 5 or 6, and they were very curious about what my condition was, what that did, how it worked. So I did a brief demonstration of how it worked and why I used it. And at this point, I was a lot better articulating my condition. So I explained to them what I had and how I could see, and trying to describe it as best as I could. That experience was a lot more positive, I would say. Yeah, it was also very much sprung on me. But at that point, I was getting more comfortable in describing my condition, talking for myself. I was also facilitating a lot of my IEP meetings by myself at that point. So being able to describe stuff to adults, like all my teachers, was good practice on how to be able to like articulate myself with younger people. And like I got a bit more confidence in that. So those are, I think, the 2 biggest sprung on me situations that I had. And then dealing with it the first time, it wasn't very good. I did feel a little bit forced and pressured and not good. Like I was reflecting like, oh, I didn't even say much. Like I could have said a lot better. I was very quiet. Like no one probably even heard me. And because I said it, no one wants to talk to me anymore. Like I should have just kept quiet. And then afterwards, the kids came, because they're a bit younger than me. They all came up to me and were like, that's so cool. Like, can I touch it? Of course I couldn't let them touch it, but I'm like, no problem. If you want to ask, just ask me questions. I'm just like you guys, like I'm just here to study. And, it was a lot more of a positive reception the second time. Both because I think they were also a lot more inquisitive because they were kids, but also I think I was a lot better and controlling the presentation myself. So,
okay. Because part of me is like, yay, teacher, for directing the questions to you, and letting you have your own voice. But could she have handled it differently? Like even just giving you a heads up or asking you, what do you think about this? A lot of kids have questions, are you comfortable? Like if she had checked it out first, would you have felt differently? Or if she had given you time to prepare? Because I'm just thinking, if anyone's listening and, maybe we have teachers listening, that what is the right way? And I guess you could think about that while we hear about Jinnie's experience too, because I'd love her thoughts on this too. So yeah, we'll come back to that. But Jinnie, you said you were made people were presenting on your behalf and roping you in sounds similar-ish.
Yeah. So certain things are similar. And I think like that was part of the reason why I resented it. Excuse me, at first. So like I know in my elementary school, my support team was like, yeah, we should do this. And I was like, no, because like I already had like a lot of like, honestly, kids did not talk to me. Kids did not want to hang out with me. And the fact that they were only interested in my equipment and like how things worked really was hard for me. Because that's the only questions they would ever ask. And then, it's the completely opposite, way. Like sometimes that starts friendships, but in my case, that was all they were interested in. And I was like, no. And they're like, well, this is such a good thing. And, we did it. And then again, like no one really hung out with me after that. Like they learned about the equipment, but I don't think they ever learned that I was a human and just like them. So, and I think like that's the big key thing there. Or like similar to Ishita, like I'd be using a graphing calculator in math and people would come over and like ask questions and I'd be like, no, I'm not going to answer them. And the teacher would be like, don't be so rude. Like, she's like, what if someone was carrying something that you didn't know much about? And I'm like, well, first of all, like I struggle with math. It's something that's like really, really challenging. And I don't want to answer questions when I'm trying to complete a task or when I'm doing something in my day to day. Like if I did that with everybody on the street, would take me forever to get where I'm trying to go. And like, honestly, like sometimes we just need to say no and that's okay too. Or like, can I show you later how it works? Right. And I think like it was really, really stressful for me. And I think like sometimes like all of my talents would really get attributed to my blindness. So like in grade 7, like we put together a class newspaper and like everyone in the class was like adding something they had done within the year. And I'm saying we, because there was another blind student in the class, did not get to choose. We were told, you used Braille this year. You should write about Louis Braille. And I'm like, but yes, but it's awesome. That's great. But I want to write about like other things, like, other things like kids are writing about. And I think like people just attributed me to my disability. And like that's it. Like we didn't have a choice. Like when I said, can we write about something else? Or like, no, like I kind of want to do something more quote fun. Not that that's not fun, but I get it. Yeah. There's more than that, right? So it kind of put a damper on things for me for a while in terms of presenting. And then when I got older, then I was more happy to do it. And it was more self-led and more, sorry?
People were like your whole identity was wrapped up in being the blind kid.
Yeah.
Like, and that's how they treated you. And that's what they wanted you to write about. So getting up and talking about your blindness would just have magnified that even more. Yeah.
Right. But I found that when I did it of my own accord and took people that weren't in my school, it was quite a different experience. Because it wasn't like people I knew, if that makes sense. I feel like it's also more intimidating to do it with people that and are trying to make friends with. Like not every other kid is standing in front of the class doing a special presentation sort of thing. So I found like when I started doing it outside of that, it was fine. Now though, when I do it to people I know, I find it's okay and it's easier. And like we'll get to how I do them now, but I find that it's easier because they're already my friends, or they're like, hey, like how, like they'll just ask more casually. They'll be like, hey, how does this work for you? And they're still willing to socialize with me outside of my blindness. Like my blindness isn't everything. Right. And, like I get to choose when it's everything for projects. Not every project I do now is on that. So that's nice. Like there's other parts to my identity as well.
Yeah. And so they're seeing you for more than your blindness, but I suspect maybe I shouldn't assume, you might also feel differently about your blindness now than you did as a kid too. So there might be two things kind of at play.
I'd say like a little bit more confident, but I think that in terms of like the fact that I can do blindness and talk about other things about myself or like write about other things in my identity just kind of like balances it out. for me. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So Ishita, what is there something your teacher could have done differently? And Jinnie too, like what do you wish had happened in those early years in terms of presenting or inviting you to speak or not?
Yeah. I think in that situation, I think she was just really frustrated because it was hindering the continuation of what we were playing. And it would have been nicer if she maybe pulled me aside after class and say, listen, a lot of kids are asking questions. Do you mind if you talk to them at the beginning of next class a little bit about your eye condition, just so they can understand? I think that would have at least prepared me a bit, or I may have just said no and not done it. I don't know what I would have done, but at least that would have put in my, like, it would have been my decision whether or not I would have done it. But I will say she did redeem herself. And I think also, I don't think every teacher does this. I've known her for very well. I think that's maybe why she thought it would have been okay. But later on, when I think in grade, say 6, 7, maybe the year after, what I would do is at this point, because I was getting more comfortable with showing people how I see, I had these, the goggle simulators, the one that simulate different eye conditions. I had one for not mine, but a very similar condition, and would show my teachers that, just so they could at IEP meetings, and so they can understand this is roughly how I see. And it became a really good way to start conversations. I asked my O&M instructor if I could keep those a little bit longer and show them around class with supervision, because I didn't want anyone to break them. But if I could, in specific classes, maybe where a lot of people were asking questions, if I could keep those. So I said, I have them. And I went to the teacher again. I said, because PE is a class where it's highly visual and people are going to keep having questions, what we can do is use these. If you know anyone that's asking like questions, just send them to me, and I have the glasses. They can just use them while I'm describing my condition. So what we ended up doing was apparently people were being not so kind to me and saying stuff about how I wasn't able to perform on a test well. She overheard it, told me to bring the glasses, and made everyone in class perform the test with the glasses on. And she's like, listen, first of all, and as well as giving a lecture on why bullying isn't okay. And, it's a very unfortunate thing that I think a lot of people go through in high school in general, but especially if you stand out in any way, that people will be unkind and say this stuff to you. At that point, because I was getting a lot more secure with myself and my condition, I thought that was a lot better handled. I know some people wouldn't be comfortable with that, but because she knew that I had the glasses, and I approached her beforehand saying that this is, if anyone has questions, please just send them to me and we will talk it out. She just said, you know what? People won't, and again, kids can be brutal. Some people won't understand until they physically experience it. And I learned after that they were actually doing it quite a bit behind my back, and she just kind of was really frustrated. And again, she knew me very well. It kind of hurt her to see me getting bullied, even though I didn't know what was going on. So that was a lot, because I think that a lot of people came up to me and started actually talking to me about it, saying like, I'm sorry what I did. I'm like, it's okay. I didn't really know, but do you have any questions now? Is there something you want to talk about? And I actually had a lot of really nice conversations about people not knowing that I was blind or would never consider me blind, and opening up how blindness is a spectrum, and a lot of those kind of conversations. So I definitely think, yes, if the person with the disability themselves can approach you and say, this is what I'm comfortable with, this is what I'm not comfortable with, or you as a teacher going to them and saying, I'm getting a lot of these questions. Do you mind if maybe you can have a support person, your friend, your EA, me, if you need me there, anyone, a parent, to feel comfortable to talk about it. And like Jinnie was saying, people roped her into stuff. Like, I don't think that's right either, because I always think that the person who's experiencing it should have, it's their decision ultimately. And I understand the curiosity as well. We always say, like, ask us questions, but then you also got to think, when is the time to ask questions? When is it appropriate?
Well, yeah. And that's the thing. If if you have decided you want to do a presentation about blindness and you are welcoming questions, that is the perfect time. But if you didn't get any say in it and someone's decided on your behalf and they're telling you, then that's totally different. So Blind Beginnings offers presentations, and you both would be people we would send out now to do presentations, as well as myself, but and several of our youth, alumni and youth leaders. But would it, if you had a blind person come in to present to your class when you were a kid in the class, who maybe didn't even know you, but or did, whatever, but it wasn't about you, would that have been more comfortable?
No, probably not for me. Just because then I would feel like I'm not see, it's there's this balance, because then I would feel like I'm sitting here and I'm not involved and they're talking and I'm right here and everyone knows that the reason that they're coming in is because of me and because I'm in the class. So again, like I would want to feel involved, but I would want it to ultimately be my decision, because even if a blind person is coming in, it's about me. It affects me. These are relationships I'm fostering with the students. And I think like if my teachers had, maybe asked me more, or like also kind of done more of the human side of things, like I just would have felt more comfortable doing the presentations or like talking to them. And I think even now, like when I go in or used to go in and there is a blind child, like I want them to feel included. So like, I'll be like, do you want to show this with me? Like, do you want to do it with me? Because it's just awkward.
Okay. I think it's interesting. I think it depends on what age I was at. If you ask me,
yeah, that too.
I think when I was younger, no, because everyone would stare at me in class while the presentation's happening and they'll be like, oh my God, they're just like you. And like, because kids don't really have a filter. But I think when I was in high school, because I had a situation like this where it wasn't a school situation, but it was a bit outside where someone with the similar level of vision was presenting. And I was so excited. And I was like, I can get the chance to talk to this person. Like they're talking about how they're successful and their career is like amazing. And I was really excited. So I think younger me, no, but older me who was, more excited to actually do these things myself. Yes, it would have been a lot nicer to have someone come into my high school and talk a bit about blindness. And I feel like everyone may have been a bit more respectful if it was someone outside versus me. Yeah. Because I bet the kids all have a different idea because they see you every day versus another person. Also, if it's a different level of vision, they may just, I don't know. I feel like when a speaker comes in, they're a bit more respectful and they're more likely to listen. So I think, interesting.
I agree too. When I was older, I would have been more open, especially like you said, if they're talking about their life and their career and their success, not just blindness and how they operate. Like that is such an important component. It's not just, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you do that? Because sometimes the questions like feel more like an interview. Like there are things that you do in the world beyond that.
Okay. Yeah. So here's another idea then, because I'm just trying to solve all the problems of the world, What if in elementary school, because my son actually, he's in grade 4, and they had to do a PowerPoint presentation about themselves to their class, like stand up in front of the class and show slides and talk about themselves. So if everyone had to do a presentation about themselves, you could showcase who you are in all the, the things you enjoy doing, the things you love. And you could incorporate some things about Braille, like Braille, blindness, whatever, white cane, tools you use if you wanted to, but it would be more of the whole picture.
I would say 100%. Yeah. Like, so I know like we're not really talking about university, but that's why I'm more okay with it now. So like we'll do projects in class. So like in my children's literature class, everyone had to talk about a different aspect of children's literature. So everyone had to pick a topic. So then I was more okay picking disability because also no one
Mhm.
else was covering that. Or like in my intercultural communications class, we all had to pick a culture. Everyone was picking like ethnic cultures. I decided to go with disability culture. So in that way, it was more of a helping me tool in class, as well as everyone was doing the assignment. So it kind of doesn't make me feel singled out. Or like if I'm working with a team, like right now we're doing some research on the floods here that happened in the Fraser Valley, and everyone's talking about a different aspect of farming. I just happen to be talking about accessible farming. So it's still integrated within the larger picture, and I'm more okay with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, totally agree. You asking this question brought me back. I remember in grade, I think 9, we did a get to know me presentation at the beginning of the year. And I didn't talk much about blindness outside of a fun fact that I knew Braille. And then that was kind of my way of integrating it into it and opening up the floor for questions. But in my education class in university, I think university, and we can get into a bit more, it gives you a bit more opportunity to do this. And it also depends on the class and the topic, but similar situation as a get to know me thing at the beginning, where each student would have a presentation going and everyone would be going through the class and reading them. Since it was just a non-interactive presentation where I wasn't speaking, I just had full-fledged slides about blind beginnings and my job and me and my disability, growing up with a disability, and what I hope to gain out of this class, which focused around education and accessible education being a part of it. So yeah, I think if it's already, or you get the chance to incorporate it into a presentation where everyone else is doing, I think that would be really great. And it's a really cool opportunity to get to that.
It sounds like your equipment was something that kids were really curious about. Is there other things that people were asking about? Let's start in the elementary, middle school years. Like, is that the thing that kids wanted to know about or were curious about?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
My vision teacher for sure got labeled as my mom, which is very weird because she's not the same race as me. That was kind of interesting to explain. But like, I think anyone that people see you with, they're like, "Is that your mom?" No, that's not my mom.
But people thought my mobility instructor was my dad too. So yeah.
So I think that that was a big part of people asking who she was and why I would leave class for O&M and like why I would miss things. That was a big part of it as well. And in my class, because in elementary school, we wouldn't switch classes, we would just stay in that one class. So my equipment was always there. I had like a big cabinet that the teacher had like the lock, the key for, that I could only access like my Braille paper, my Brailler, my large text, like the large notebooks that I had for print. All that was there. So a lot of the kids did have questions about what's going on, like who's this person, like why are you doing all this? And I would usually address it at the beginning of class. If to individual people at that point, again, I didn't like to give the presentation. So if anyone had a question, I would just tell them that this is my vision teacher. This is Kendra, who was at the time was a vision teacher, and why I would leave for O&M, what I was doing. I would just be honest. Like I was crossing the street and like learning how to cross the street without being able to see it. Everyone would like freak out and be like, "What? You're doing what?" And like try to. That was my second year doing O&M, so I didn't understand fully that it was for independence sake. But I'm just like, I want to learn because you guys can do it, and I want to do it too. So. Yeah, a lot of these questions did come because of just the people that were around me supporting me and the equipment that was around me supporting me.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. Unfortunately, for me too, a lot of my disability is visual. So like, whoa, what's that thing you're carrying? It's a stick. Like, why do you have it? Or why is your machine so loud? Now it's always about the it's like, 'cause I have a dog, so that kind of introduces it, which I find actually easier because a dog is still a dog. So it's like more so, oh, she's your mobility tool, but okay, tell me more about her. What's she like? What's her name? Oh my gosh, she's so cute. Like there's more to it. So I really like it. now than I did before.
Well, that's really interesting because it's kind of the same thing again. Like people see a white cane, and it's specifically a tool because you're blind. And just like they see only your blindness, now there's a guide dog, but a dog is a dog is a dog, and they're seeing her personality and her cuteness in addition to the fact that she's a tool, right? Like it's like that's really important to you that they see you as a whole, the whole picture, not just
really
the blindness.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess if people did want, if they could see, so I'm thinking of teachers, and you've got a blind student in your class, and you can see that the student is not integrating with the other kids in the ways that you would hope, or maybe the other kids have a lot of questions. Maybe the best approach is to talk to the blind student. Do you want to do a presentation? Would you be comfortable if somebody else, maybe from Blind Beginnings, came in to present to the class? Would you want to do a presentation with somebody from Blind Beginnings? Or if, you're in a community that isn't British Columbia, whoever the blindness organization is that does that sort of thing, maybe that's the way to get around this. Because I feel like maybe there would be, I remember in elementary school, an assembly where a blind couple came in and presented to the school. And I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know. I don't think I even knew that I was legally blind at that point. So maybe I would have felt differently if I had known, but it didn't have anything to do with me. But they were there talking about some of the equipment they used and some of the ways that they navigated the world. And I found it really interesting. And so I don't know, like, I don't know if, it was anonymous enough and disconnected from me enough that it didn't make me feel like the focus was on me. So I don't know if that makes a difference.
No, I think that's fair. I think at least trying to again put myself into my younger self's shoes. I feel like at least just asking them, hey, we're going to have these people come in. Would you like to be a part of the presentation? Would you like to meet them beforehand? Do you want to be connected in any way? Do you want them to talk about you? Or do you want to just be on the stage? You don't have to say anything. If yes, we'll figure it out. We'll try and get it done. If no, that's okay. No one's going to know that you met with them beforehand or you met with a principal or anything like that. Like it can just be between the people who are organizing it and the people who are coming. But I think having the person involved at least somewhat, just to let them know, or not I wouldn't say warn them, but just say, we're going to have someone talk about blindness in the school because we want to increase our awareness for the students and the teachers and whoever. I just think it'll be, we want to do it. Do you want to be involved? No, that's okay. Yes. Please get involved. And also you can also say, if people are asking questions afterwards, or you're feeling uncomfortable, come talk to us. Is there something we can change for next time? Is there something that we can do? Because kids change their mind a lot. They may be, actually, I want to be involved next time. Oh my God. Like, this was amazing. Or this was awful. Never again. I would hope it's the first one, but I just think having them involved in some way privately first. And then if they choose to do it publicly, that might just be the best way, because I think I would have appreciated that way myself a lot more
like a room for choice, because often when you have a disability, everyone usually chooses things for you. So to even have a choice just gives you a lot of control that way too, especially when like doctors and so many people are already talking about you and professionals are already talking about you. It really gives you a choice. And I think another thing too is that looking back at my younger self too, it has to be a two-way street. And what I mean by that is, so people could ask me questions, but when I started playing with pencils and scribbling on paper, or like being like, what's a rainbow? Or what's a sunset? Why is that color like that? Why is like this? It'd be like, you're weird. Why don't you know that stuff? But nowadays I laugh with people all the time, because I'll be like, oh, really? Like that font looks like that? And then they'll ask me a question because they're super interested. And I think it has to go both ways. If they want to know stuff about me, then I'm going to ask you questions about your sighted world. And I never got the opportunity ever to do that, either in elementary school or in middle school. So
yeah, that's an interesting point. I imagine your feelings about it would really depend a lot on how you're treated after the presentation or how the presentation goes too, right? Like if it's well received by the other kids and everybody thinks it was really cool that this blind person came and presented and we learned so many interesting things and we got to ask questions, you might feel as the student like, oh, okay, that went well. But if everybody's like, well, that was really boring and why do we have to listen to that? Or I don't know. Or
that's like, for me, what kind of like was the issue. Like they would think it was cool, but they wouldn't think that it was cool in the sense of, yeah, or that, oh, blind people can like run and play. They're like, this is how she reads and writes. Or can I try using the brailler? Like afterwards, like I got a lot more questions like that and a lot more engagement with me in the classroom, but outside of classroom socially, no. So I think that was the thing too.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just reminding me weirdly of when I first met my husband and all the questions. And I actually had said after the second date, like, we need to go do something physical. So you see that I am more than my blindness, that I can do stuff that, you know, we don't just have to sit in a restaurant and eat and talk.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think when you start to show people the other sides of you and the capabilities you have, it probably makes a big difference.
I were to give a presentation kind of going off of my first experience of when I saw someone talking about their career and their accomplishments and their family and how multifaceted, like just how their life was going. That's how I would want to present it and probably how I'd want to learn about it, because it was a part of the presentation, but it was an aspect of it. It was like a lens looking through their life through the lens of having a disability. That's the best way I can describe it. Where yes, it's a part of it and you're looking through that and you can understand that this is the perspective that they have, but it's so much more than that. It is their career, like I said, their life, their family, their friends, how they moved through education and how, like, where they are today. So I think even if you're just like showing a video of you like rock climbing as a person who is blind or have a disability as a hobby, like this is one of my hobbies, and you're showing them through a video that this is one of the things I like to do, and they can physically see that you're doing it, but also it opens up the discussion of how you do it as a blind person, but also, hey, anyone else like rock climbing? We can talk about that. Yeah. So like, I think not making it the whole presentation, and I think people would have different ways to approach it, but I would certainly love to learn more about just their life and kind of incorporates into their life and like everyday aspects.
Wow, this is so good. I feel like I'm actually learning so much through this. And I think that we will incorporate that in future presentations. Like, tell us about you, right? Like, what do you like to do? How do you like to spend your time? What are your hobbies? What are your interests? And because that is how people are going to get the full scope of, it's not just how to use a white cane and how to read Braille and what a guide dog does. And, you know, there's so much more. Those are just tools, really. That's not who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Jinnie, you started to talk about what you do now at university. I'm curious, both of you are in university. How do you tackle educating people now?
I just want to say, now I love doing these presentations and stuff just because I can adapt it the way I want. Nowadays, like I mentioned before in the podcast, like projects within the school environment where everyone else is doing a project. That's a great way to do it for me. Or extracurricular wise. So I started, anyone can do this, not just the disabled person, but we have a newspaper. So I started a disability column, and it's called Deconstructing Disability. So it focuses on all things disability and accessibility related within the post-secondary sector. And that's one way I choose to do it. And I also get to bring in my writing because, again, that's part of who I am. And that's something I love. I just happen to be writing about disability, or like projects I'm doing with professors, like the one on farming. I just happen to be, sometimes talking about accessible farming. And I think like doing it more in extracurricular ways helps me more than kind of feeling like, oh, this class on sociology, okay, I got to step in here and now make it about me for 5 minutes and then go to the class. Like the class is the class. Like I don't want to disrupt that unless it's to say don't pet my dog.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say very similar for me. I think like I do it, I would say, more through my work. So if it's a paper or if it's a group presentation, like for one of my papers, it was a term paper and we get to talk about anything that we wanted to. So I talked about a little bit of a controversial topic in the sense of like, I think everyone's perspective was changed from my paper. It was how accessibility centers aren't accommodating and challenging that perspective that everyone in the university had. And I wanted to say no, because everyone has struggles with this. And I did a lot of personal research and then kind of talking to other students and like compiling a whole paper based on that and presenting it to my teacher, who was very open the fact that he knew nothing about anything, but really wanted to learn more and was open to listen. And we had a peer review aspect of it. So I got to swap papers with some of my peers and hearing their feedback on kind of what they learned. So that like that, I've done it through in some of my papers, but I also did it in one of my group presentations in a class for an education class where we weren't talking about disability at all. It was about a certain kind of therapy. But that therapy was very open-ended and didn't talk straight away from the medical model a lot. So I took the opportunity to talk a bit about the medical model and how people in the disability community, how that impacts us, and alternatively talking a bit about the social model of disability. So it wasn't related, but my teacher really liked that I made with that, and actually lectured a bit about that afterwards. And I talked to her afterwards and she said, thank you for bringing this up, because people just don't know that this exists. And we talked a bit about her experience as an Indigenous woman and going through the medical system and how it was impacted like that. So I've done it in more personal ways, but then when I get the chance to do it in projects and presentations and with groups or with anything like that, I take the opportunity. And like I said, like Jinnie said, we don't want to take away from the actual class or people's times, because you don't want to always shove it in people's faces. But when it's appropriate and when it's done in a way that you're comfortable with and it's your decision, and hopefully people will take something away from it and learn from it. But yeah, it's definitely in a different way, but I would say I enjoy it a lot more as well now.
Yes. Yeah.
And do students follow up with you afterwards and ask you questions about your disability when you have kind of opened the door a little bit in those ways?
For me, I would say it's funny. So in terms of like intercultural communications project that happened right when COVID hit. So no one was talking for a while. So Unfortunately, nothing really came of that one. Honestly, I think it's weird to say, but honestly, the students who talk to me the most are those who I'm in classes with, like where I don't talk about my blindness as much. Like in my writing classes, that's where I have seen the more students come up to me randomly and like more so casually sit down with me and chat about blindness. And I don't know if maybe that's just less intimidating, or maybe they've seen me as like a student first or something. But I find like within like classes where you're doing a project, a lot of the times, since it is a project, right, everyone's like has to listen anyway, so it's a little bit more harder, I would say. Yeah,
I think it's been a mix for me. I've had people come up to me just afterwards and ask questions and be done with it, but I've had people come to me 2 years after because we and we're both doing the same program. We just had a class to go, and we met again this like semester. And just recently I had someone come up to me and say, "Oh, I remember you from my second year course." And it was really cool to see your experiment that you did. And I'm like, I have no idea who this person is, but cool.
Yeah.
I think you also tend to in university, it's a bit different than high school. Of course, there's a lot more people. You may not remember everyone, but I think when you naturally you have a cane or a dog with you, you tend to stand out a bit more. And when I was presenting my experiment, I had a lab assistant with me, and I did stand with a small tutorial. So I can understand how someone would stick in your mind like that. So it was a weird thing where I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And they were asking me about my schooling, how it's working with the center and everything. And so it definitely has led to friendships in some case and follow-up questions. And so it's been a bit of both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've completely about faced on this, and I loved giving presentations and educating people about blindness. Obviously, there's this podcast. We talk about it all the time. And I really do think that if more people understood, life would be easier. We would be more accepted. It just wouldn't be, if we could demystify and take away the mystery. So I love doing presentations. And I also feel like presenting to schools is one of the ways to kind of, I don't know, prepare the future generation and teach them about disability, because they are the future employers. And, they're I don't know, I just feel like it will be better for everybody the more people the more that people are educated. So I think Blind Beginnings is going to continue to do presentations, but maybe we will be a little more thoughtful about what we present and who is included, and just checking in, making sure that it's comfortable for anybody who is present, who is blind.
I actually think if presentations aren't what people are ready for at the moment, I think using the podcast and the blog are a great way to be like an introduction into it.
Exactly.
A lot of schools now are doing media, like education off of media. So assigning an assignment based on the Limitless podcast. Mm-hmm. And that's actually going to be one of my projects this semester, and talking about, it is going to be psychological disorders, but I can easily see a teacher adopting this into their classroom and assigning to read the podcast, listen to the podcast, read the blog, and have a discussion in class about it. It's a lot less pressure on anyone if they're not ready to do a presentation, if they don't want to bring someone in. I still think that's a great idea, but it could be a really good first initial introduction into it. And I think that would have been really cool growing up, getting to listen to it and then writing a write-up about it or talking about it in class. Like that would have been a really nice thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think as well, like when I grew up as well, history classes never talked about disabled people, never talked about, anything like that. When we talked about the eye in science, never talked about eye conditions. Like you can easily integrate this stuff within the learning. So again, that's your first step done right there.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
And it's just diverse learning as well. So
for sure. Yep. So I do want to make a little bit of a plug. The first full week of February is White Cane Week. And if there is somebody listening who would like a blindness presentation or a blind person to come and meet their class, maybe that's a better way to put it. We do have speakers, presenters, youth and young adults who are blind or partially sighted, who are willing to do that in several different communities around British Columbia. I've even done a virtual presentation to a school with a blind student during COVID. So something like that is also available. And we'd love to do another Ask Abby episode. So we've done a few over the the lifespan of the podcast. Ask Abby is Ask a Blind Beginnings Youth. So if you have questions, things you're curious about blindness and visual impairment, you can email limitless@blindbeginnings.ca, and maybe the subject is Ask Abby, and just send in your questions. We will keep them anonymous unless you want them to not be anonymous. And if we do get enough questions, we'll gather a group of youth together and record an Ask Abby episode, which we'd love to release the week of White Cane Week. So please send us in your questions. And we've been talking about, maybe people not wanting to be the focus to be just their disability, but in a situation like an Ask Abby or an invited presentation, we are very happy to come and talk about our lives, how we do things, and answer any of your questions. Thank you so much, Jinnie and Ishita, for sharing and educating me today. I learned a lot. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was great to have this discussion.
You've been listening to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast. If you have a question, a comment, a future topic request, please send us an email to limitless@blindbeginnings.ca. Please share our podcast, like, subscribe, leave us a rating, and join us next time.
This podcast has been brought to you by Blind Beginnings, an organization based in Vancouver, Canada, that supports children and youth who are blind or partially sighted, along with their families. Music for this podcast is composed by Shawn Bishop and Clement Chow. Production and audio editing by Rob Minot. For more information about Blind Beginnings and the work it does to support children and youth who are blind and partially sighted, along with their families, visit us on the web at www.blindbeginnings.ca, and also remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.